Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'd like to do something a little different than the other videos on my channel. I wanted to do a kind of bullet journal layout video just to be able to show you guys different layouts you can use for bullet journal weekly spreads, but also just as a way for me to have a place for all of the layouts so that I have a place to come back to when I'm running out of ideas or I don't know how to set up the next weekly. Only items I will be using is an A5 dotted journal. This is from Archer and Olive, a black pen, and a ruler. For reference, this journal is 26 dot grid spaces across and then 38 dot grid spaces down. I'm going to start off with a bunch of basic spreads. These are spreads that you will see different variations of. Most spreads are made out of this simple layout. It's just that parts may be shortened or condensed for decoration to serve the writer's purpose better. So for our first two spreads, I'm going to do them on one page each. These kinds of spreads are good if you maybe don't have a lot to write from day to day, but you would also like to have a page just for weekly notes. So kind of in the same style as a Hobonichi Weeks. So if this whole thing is the spread, one half of it will be dedicated to the weekly view, and then the other half you can dedicate to whatever you want. To start, I'm going to make a line down the middle. So because there are 26 dot grid spaces across, I'm going to make a mark down the page at 13. Just as a stylistic choice, I like to start at the second dot instead of the very end. I don't know why. Then to divide the page into 8 spaces, I'm going to divide the dot grid spaces into 4 different sections. So because it is 38 spaces down, I'm going to just take 2 off the end and divide 36 into 4, which is 9 spaces each. Alternatively, instead of putting the 2 extra dot grid spaces on the top and bottom, you could also just put them both at the top and then leave room to write the week of the year that you're in. So you could write like week of February 2nd to February 8th on top, but because I like things to be even, I just did the extra spaces on the top and bottom. So now that you have this spread, because there are 7 days of the week, obviously one is going to be empty. So you can use this space for either decoration or you can write the week of. So I usually like to just write week of and fill it up with some sort of decoration. Then of course you can write out the days of the week. And that is the first spread finished. Now for the second spread, I'm also going to do a 1-page spread, but it's going to be more reminiscent of the Hobonichi Week style. So because it is 38 grid spaces down, I want to divide it into 7 sections. So I'm going to leave 3 sections at the top and then start my divisions. Each section is going to have 5 dot grid spaces for a total of 7. And then you can use the top space for decoration or writing down what week it is. Those are our 2 1-page spreads finished. Again, these are perfect for people who want to maybe have more of a condensed journal, like maybe you don't have a journal that has that many pages, or you just find that you don't have a lot to write day to day. That's totally fine. These spreads are good for people like that. The rest of the spreads are going to be 2-page spreads. So I'm going to start with the most basic spreads. For the first one, you're going to want to make a line down the middle of both pages. So that will be 19 spaces down. And then you want to also divide the page in half vertically. So that will be 13 spaces across. Now that you've divided both pages into 8 different sections, you can label them. So as always, I designate the first box to the week of, and it's also good for decoration, and then the other boxes will be the dailies, and you can write them however you want. You can do Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, or you can do Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. It doesn't really matter as long as you get all of them down. That is the completed third spread. This is very simple and good for when you don't have a lot of time, but you still want to write down your weekly. And I think it's going to look very nice with decoration, or it can look very minimalist if you just keep it like this. For the fourth spread, we're going to do something similar, except we're going to only divide it up horizontally. I'm going to make the same line across the middle like I did before, with 19 grid spaces down. And then I'm also going to further divide up the sections with a line in between. Since it's 19, that is uneven, so I'm just going to put the extra line on the top and bottom. I'm going to make my line 10 spaces down. And I'm going to do the same for this line. I'm going to make it 10 spaces down from the middle. Oops, I made it 10 instead of 9, but it's supposed to be 9 if you want it to look even. And there you have 8 sections again. Alternatively, you can just make each section 9 spaces and then leave the 2 extra spaces at the top for you to write something else, or you can just leave the sides wider so you can decorate the sides. And that is the completed fourth spread. The next spread is going to be slightly more advanced. This one is going to have a lot more spaces. So you want to start out by dividing each page vertically in half. That's going to be 13 spaces. And then you're going to want to divide each page into thirds. I'm going to leave 2 spaces at the top, and then I'm going to divide each section into 12 dark grid spaces. This is a spread that allows for a lot of decoration because you're not using the whole spread like you were for these. Not that those spreads couldn't be used for decoration as well. This kind of marks out this page in a way that shows you exactly where to write and where to decorate. Because there are 6, you can just take your pick of where you want to write things. So I'm going to use the first box just to write the date or week of, and then I'm just gonna fill it out randomly as an example. So this is an example of how you can fill it out, and then the blank spaces you can use for extra notes, or you can just freely decorate. This next spread is probably the last one of the really basic ones, just to get you started. I'm going to divide each page into 4 columns, so that means that each column is going to be 6 spaces. Because the grid spacing is 26 across, you're going to have some blank spaces on the edges, so I'm going to leave those blank. You can use those extra spaces for extra notes. So for example, this bigger one could be where you write the date and then a running to-do list, or you want to put in a little mini calendar, and then the other ones will be devoted to the weekly part. I think this layout is really good for people who mostly use to-do lists, because for writing you don't really have a lot of space unless you wanted to use it vertically. That's fine too, because this is the versatility of using a dark grid notebook. So you may have noticed that the spreads that I have chosen so far all give extra room to each day, but I know a lot of people might not have that busy of a weekend, so these are going to be spreads you can use for shorter Saturday and Sundays. First, I'm going to divide each page into thirds. 2 of them are going to be 9 and 1 of them is going to be 8. And then for this last column, we're going to divide it in half so that we have enough columns for the week. Okay, I wrote the days wrong, but it's supposed to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday. So you don't have as much room for the weekend. Remember that you can also shorten these columns so you can have room to write the week and also for more decoration. This next one is going to be a variation of the horizontal spread we did, but it's going to have less room for the Saturday, Sunday. I'm going to divide this page into thirds, so that means each space is going to be 12 document spaces. So I left the top spaces empty, and then now you have 6 sections. So you can divide the last section in half, and then you have your 7-day spread. I think these spreads are really good for people who do a lot during the day and then not a lot during the weekend, but because I have the chance of working on the weekend, I like to just make all my spaces equal. So those are the 8 basic journal spreads that make up most of the spreads you see online. You can use them throughout the year for all of your weeklies. If you like this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye!